Several countries around the world, in terms of 4 commodity areas, which are imports from China, whether they are commodities, basic manufactured goods, advanced manufactured goods, e-commerce, these are the countries or the regions that have some kind of import restrictions on China in these product categories. If you wonder why European Union is not there, I'll show you in the next slide, because it is not individual countries, but it's European Union as a whole that basically deals with these matters. So basically every single region in the world today, not just the United States, every single region in the world had something or the other to feel concerned about the imports coming from China in these areas. And you can see here, for example, in the case of Europe, different countries depend on China. For example, to interpret this chart, take the case of Malta, which imports 200 HS6 category items from China, imports from China, and exports 0. So the only 2 countries which have some kind of exports to China are actually France, Germany, maybe Italy there, and that too they export 8 categories, or in the case of Germany 9 categories, but their imports are 150 items. So basically Europe as a whole, the dependence ratio is 120:1 on China's imports. And naturally, in spite of the import dependence, 80% of all import restrictions or protection measures pursued by Europe are directed at one country, which is China. And this is done by, this is all research from the Mercator Institute of China Studies, MERIX, which is based in Germany. So the point is that what is being pursued by the United States administration has been pursued by other countries quietly over time, and it is happening, and these are all signs of unsustainability. So had things been allowed to continue in this fashion, they would have reached this point maybe a few years later in an equally more chaotic manner, or maybe the problem would have become even bigger to sort out. So that is something that we need to keep in mind when we reflect on what is going on today, whether they represent a necessary disruption or not. And disruptions do open up opportunities, including for India, and that's what we will come to next. So as far as India is concerned, while we might worry about the first, second, third round effects of the tariffs in terms of external demand to start with, and the overall uncertainty it creates, and therefore the implications for capital formation, etc. One important thing is that there is an unstated pursuit of lower oil prices, maybe up to as low as $50 per barrel. And today, as we speak, the Brent crude, which is important for India, is about $61, which is a huge 25% discount, just barely 3 months ago to the Brent crude price, which I think is an important quote-unquote windfall from the Indian context in terms of input cost, or in terms of fiscal duty receipts in some sense. And China plus one, which was a different dimension earlier, now acquires a much higher sense of urgency for many other companies located inside China. So in some sense, you can call it a second wind. And we used to, sort of lament or bemoan the lack of progress in China plus one earlier, forgetting the fact that many of these relocations would naturally have first flowed to countries from which it was easy to send goods across to the United States, whether it was Vietnam or Cambodia, etc. And India would naturally have come somewhat later in the queue because of cultural, religious, language, other affinities, which made it easier to relocate from China to Vietnam, because they were all scenified societies. India was not. So it's easy to relocate production there. But now, due to a completely different set of circumstances, I think China plus one acquires a much higher sense of urgency, and we might see the progress much more than what we used to see in the last 5 years since COVID. And many of these headlines you might have seen yourself. And the specific product categories, of course, you can say that the new rate, which is shown in the last column in each of these blocks, is temporarily suspended, right? Because now it's 10% for everybody except for China. And you can see that if it is 10% for everybody, then India and Vietnam are equal for the time being until July 9th or so.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe. If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.